Welcome back, everybody, to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here. We like to get into the stories that really have shaped some of the most significant, successful people who are creating impact in this world. And today is no different. I got an opportunity to share a stage with this incredible individual who has been on a large platform on a major, well-known reality television show, has amassed quite the following, I think near 400,000, but also had such humility and grace and warmth in the time that we connected, and admitted in person these elements and faults and lessons that she had learned. And I immediately knew that she had some depth. And though we've not spent any time together beyond that, what I've witnessed since that time is her starting to advance further on her own journey of love. Her finding ways to express pieces about herself that are important and critical for people to hear that maybe were hidden before. And it's been really amazing to see you, my friend Kelly, blossom over this most recent period. And you were already blossoming before. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. That was quite an introduction. I love it.
Well, it's funny. It's gotten to a point now. We're 26 episodes deep, and I must have some knack for introductions. I'm not making this about me. I'm not trying to say this to impress, but I always just like to introduce people based on how I see them, how I've interacted with them. And, one of my gifts is I do get to see pain and armor, but I also see people's power and potential. And so I get to see a lot of who people are. And so I like to introduce people that way because, again, you're here because I want your story featured. But those are my words. How do you describe yourself in your words? Who are you?
Wow. I am a sunshine.
That's great. I love that answer.
Yeah, I do. I feel like I'm a ray of sunshine most of the time. I feel that for me, what you said about potential, that was not to say that was like not a word that existed in my vocabulary years ago, but, and I know we're going to dive into this, but I was more in like a fixed mindset my whole life growing up, and not to the extreme that I didn't think other things were possible for me or whatever. It was just like the world that I have opened myself up to in the last 5 years is totally different than a world I lived 5 years plus ago. Like there is so much potential. There's so much ambition. And yes, I probably could argue controversially that I'm like, I think it is a choice every day what we do and how we can prosper in life. And there's people out there, yes, they're going to be like, well, that's a very privileged thing to say. And I can rebuttal that and be like, I know people that literally don't have arms and legs that are public speaking and making hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars a year. Okay. Yes, I get it. There are people that are trapped. They're in slavery, right? I get that. Okay. But like the normal Joe walking the street or Jill, you have a choice every day. And so I have a choice too. And just because I have a platform, that doesn't mean anything. And I can dive into this, but like people think because you have hundreds of thousands of followers, you are a millionaire. You're not a fucking millionaire. Excuse me. I don't know if I can cut something here, but
you can say fuck as many times as you want.
Anyways, I'm just saying like the following number doesn't mean anything. Yeah. It's what goes on up here in your mind. And I went through a lot of turmoil after Love is Blind came out and inner stuff. Like, although I honestly recorded like 5 videos on my phone about a month and a half ago because I was like, oh my gosh, like I just had this like groundbreaking epiphany come through because of like what I was experiencing. And basically like I've been going through this whole like spiritual awakening, personal development journey for 5 years since 2018. And a lot of very significant things have happened within those 5 years. So it's like when I'm trying to discover this new version of myself, now I get 400,000 followers telling me who I'm supposed to be. So it was like, wait, what am I? Who am I? How am I supposed to show up? It was a lot. But anyways, back to that. I was just saying like the power of potential. We all have so much potential inside of us that we have not even tapped into.
Yeah.
And so I like to help people discover that potential with themselves too.
Yeah. And the reality of it is you obviously speak from a place of perspective, right? Like you've been there, you've been lost, you've been disconnected, you've been isolated, and that's obvious. And we talked about some of the things a little bit in our interactions when we met. It's interesting to hear you say the 400,000 followers doesn't mean anything. And I say it's interesting because I love that you fucking said it. Right. The reality, but it's the truth. Right. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter the size of the following. It doesn't matter how much money's in the bank. Right. Like that is the biggest challenge. And you just had a larger platform that created struggle, because that's one of the greatest things that people struggle with, is actually living congruently with who they authentically are versus who the world told them who to be.
Totally.
Right. And that began way before your show, by the way. You had the world telling you who to be early on. And so, you even talked about that a little bit. It's like, yeah, I had these belief systems and I had this thought process and how I was going to go about things. And right. All of us have those situations. And so I guess give us a little perspective on your life pre-TV and pre-following that only really put pressure on what already existed.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I would say like in my whole 20s and very early 30s, I was now what's been revealed during therapy and mindset coaching, life coaching, because I invest all the time in those types of therapies and modalities. But basically, I was very much going through the motions. I didn't feel like I had a purpose in life. I graduated, within 4 years from a party school here in Georgia. I call it a party school. It's a great school, but it was very much known for being party school. And I fell into that partying in college. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I was growing up. People would ask you when you're 8 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I literally always said, I want to be a baby doctor, a teacher, or an actor. That's what I said. And sometimes simultaneously a singer or a dancer. Obviously, there's some type of performer going on inside of me.
By the way, I'm pretty sure those are the exact goals my daughter has right now.
Really? Yeah.
Almost like any one of those categories, that's it. And then recently she decided that she wants to be a mermaid that rides a unicorn. And I'm just trying to figure out how to make that happen for her.
That's me. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Encourage that for sure. So, when you're younger, up until high school, really, everyone's like, okay, that's great. Yeah, keep going for that. Right. But then reality sets and and this is, again, nothing against my parents in any regard, but okay, I want to be an actress. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher for 15 years. And anyone who's listening who's a teacher or knows someone who is, they know it's not an easy job, right? So my mom encouraged me to go a different path, right? So that was out. The doctor thing, they were like, you just went through X amount of years of school. You're now going to have to go through 10 more years of school. And I was like, yeah, that does not sound appealing to me, right?
Is there partying involved?
Right, exactly. I was like, no. So, and then the acting thing, they were just, of course, being safe, keeping me safe in that regard, and just saying that's a very competitive, unless you know someone, you don't just become a star overnight necessarily, right? So everything I wanted to be was discouraged, let's put it that way, for lack of a better term. And therefore I went into school. My sister was a fashion merchandising major. And she's a year older, and I was like, fine, I'll just do that too. I like clothes. Literally did not like the major at all, but I did it. I got out of it, and I've never been in fashion since, except for me shopping. Wow. Outside of that, I've been in sales and account management. And that was fine, but I just felt like I was going to work every day for a paycheck, and literally going to see friends and getting a paycheck. That was the reason I was showing up for work every day, not because I was passionate in what I was ever doing. So I also worked multiple different jobs on top of that, whether it was bartending or working liquor promotions, or in 2013, I got certified as a health coach. And I probably would have never done that, but my mom had gotten certified as a health coach, and she was like, hey, I know you're obviously big into health too. We all are. Our whole family has been my whole life. So she was like, well, maybe you should go through that. If anything, you just learn knowledge, whether you do anything professionally with it or not. And so I was like, okay, sure. So I went through the program and became a health coach in 2013. But I was still it still didn't feel I don't know, when you go into oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, it's kind of you have a different vision and then what it looks like than what it feels like every time. So it was as far as the career and business stuff goes, that's how it was. I mean, I continued to work my full-time job and do the coaching. I was taken on as a fitness trainer for an all audio-based fitness app. So now I have 3 jobs that I'm doing. And outside of that, comes dating and things like that. I mean, I want to say from in those 10 years of the 20s to early 30s, I had 2 solid, actual long-term relationships. But after last one, I have been single this August or September or something. I will be single for real for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyways, with all that being said, after that last relationship ended, I had obviously lost myself a lot in that relationship. So, and I wasn't finding myself. I was losing myself even more by continuing working those 3 jobs and continuing to lose myself in drinking and partying and going and staying up till God knows however late. And it was just like a constant cycle. So it was crazy because it was like I was living almost like two different extremes. I was from Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday. I mean, I'd get up at like 5 a.m. I'd teach workout classes. I would work all day. I'd come home. I'd work my other jobs, do my coaching calls and whatnot. And there's no drinking. Like I was pure. I ate really well. And then come Friday through the week, for the weekend, it's like, okay, I'm ready to show up. I'm ready to party and like, let's go, And so I never had to, like, my parents would come to my house and like, Kelly, do you not like clean ever? And I'm like, I don't have time, or I'm hungover. Really? Those were like really my 2 excuses. Yeah. And I got in such radical burnout, and a lot had to do with love life. I mean, guys that I was dating or wanting to date and it not working out, and me being, it kind of came down to like, what's wrong with me? Like, why don't they want to actually be with me? And, everyone was like, Kelly, I feel like you're like dating projects. And obviously when I started to make changes, I'm like, wow, I was probably essentially trying to fix everyone else when I was the one who needed a little repair, or a lot of repair. So yeah, 2017, I decided, I was like, nothing changes if nothing changes. I can't keep doing this to myself. I want to be married one day. And the path that I've been doing this song and dance for four and a half years at that point, constantly just doing that same cycle all the time. So yeah, and I had health issues, of course, as well. I mean, I had weight gain changes, like all this stuff. And yeah, so I had to change everything. And so the end of 2017 was when it sort of kind of to start. And then 2018 was when I really like started listening to podcasts, and I invested in coaches and that kind of thing. And we filmed Love is Blind during that time. So there were a lot of things, but that version of me, I'm aware now. I think that's the key to change, is like when you have the awareness, right? So it's like that burnout life. I mean, I work a lot now too, but I'm passionate about what I'm doing. Yeah. And with that being said, I also know that even when you're passionate, you can run yourself to the ground. So I have a laundry list of things to do, but I make sure that I take care of me, because at the end of the day, my business and my relationships are not going to be as strong as they need to be if I'm not strong as I need to be. Yeah. So I'll go for my walks. I'll do my yoga. I'll do the things that I need to do in order to show up as my best self for people. That's really important. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing all of that context. There's quite a journey in there, and you embedded lots of little pieces that I'd love to dig into. Sorry. I go on rants. No, it's great. It's great. Every detail is important. No. I believe it is all important, and it was what was supposed to be said because it's what was said. So it's all good. I'm just figuring out where I want to go with it. So I'm really curious. What's your relationship with alcohol today? Well, I actually just had a conversation with myself recently. 2 things happened. I was recognizing over the last year that, again, I don't really drink during the week. I'm a social drinker. I don't have to. I mean, if my girlfriends came over and they brought a bottle of wine, sure, I'm going to drink. Yeah. But if there's no wine, I'm not like, okay, guys, we need to go to the liquor store. Like, I'm like, it's totally fine. I can have water and tea. It doesn't matter. So I've been a social drinker, and there have been times over the last year that I've recognized that I am binge drinking. But granted, I do have things in my head that I'm working through that, I need to talk to a therapist about probably. But so I'm disconnecting because it feels fun to have a buzz. It feels fun to get drunk, And I'm like, oh my God, I just want to feel free. Right. And I know that that's the feeling that I was having 5+ years ago. Yeah. Because I was so burnt out. I was like, I just want to disconnect. I don't want to feel anything anymore, kind of thing. So granted, that's it. We need to connect, and we don't need to avoid, and definitely not with alcohol. But I was on like a good path of like having like 1 to 2 drinks and I was
Yeah.
fine. But then there are these moments I just overindulge and it was like ruining my whole next day. And I'm just like, okay, I have to become more intentional with this. Like if I want to drink, have the 1 to 2 and or don't. Like, you know, all you have to do is hold a cup. Like you don't even have to have liquor in it. Like put some water in it. Like it's usually just that, you know. But God is, you know, God has been showing up like real aggressively lately for me. Like I say something about the drinking and he's like, okay, sure. Well, you're going to now I had to go to a doctor the other day because I'm experiencing some health issues again. So with
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, no, it's okay. I'm sure everything will be fine.
I'm sure it will be too, but it still's never fun to go through. So I just acknowledge that. So yeah, keep going.
Thank you. Yeah, but you know, they want me to do an elimination diet, which is removing like gluten, like all the allergen foods, but also alcohol. Yeah. So I've been forced to quit alcohol. So the intention, but I have so many things going on. Like I'm writing a book. I have my podcast. I have my full-time job. I have my coaching. Like I have so many things. It's like, Kelly, you can't afford to be hungover right now. Like your time is of the essence. Yeah. So God is just like, be careful what you wish for, because I'm going to hand it straight to you.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you talked about. I would show up in rooms and I wasn't comfortable in myself and I was carrying armor, and alcohol is what I believed helped me lower my armor. But it also just aggravated all of the trash from my past and caused me to have the worst parts of me show up. And it wasn't right away. I was never an aggressive or an angry drunk, like none of that. But I also was doing it to blend into the rooms that I didn't feel I fit into, but I believed I needed to be in. And the elements and places with which I wasn't honoring myself. You know, you remember the little brief element that you probably heard about my story, but physical pain is something that I've dealt a lot with as well. And I will tell you that I quit drinking probably 3 or 4 years ago. Again, not because I believed I had a problem, but because I started to recognize that all it did was put me into low frequency energy. It put me into the negative emotion category. It put me into a place of feeling the need to protect even more. Right. It created all these pieces that were in me that the benefit of whatever it caused me to lower in the moment was so far offset. And it was creating more damage in my body and in my life than I desired. And when I say in my body, for me, literally, if I have a drink today, I'll feel the pain in my body for a week. Not hungover, but I literally feel a difference in the inflammation that I carry in my body because it inflames everything. But alcohol is one of those, you know, I find it so funny though, because even just layered into so much what you said is heavy levels of shame and blame. Yeah. Right. Not only on yourself, but from what the world had put on you and all these different things. And, you know, shame and blame exist. And I do find it really interesting, not to continue the conversation about alcohol for too long, but I find it fascinating that it's the only drug that people get publicly shamed for not consuming. Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like we know the negative effects it can have on people. And again, I'm not vilifying drinking. I love booze. I still will have drinks. Right. Like it's not a problem for tons of people in tons of ways. It's a choice for me, but I find it fascinating that society shames people. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was like, I want to say this was years ago when I was still like in the binge, like every weekend mode. You know, I was like, oh, I'm not drinking this weekend. And friends would be like, Kel, come on. You know, it was like the peer pressure and, or why is there something wrong? And I'm like, no, I just think that like, I just need to not drink this weekend. But then, you know, so I would either be disciplined and stay with it, or I'd be like, all right, fine. Okay. You're right. I want to have fun too. Which just happens. Right. And so again, it's like, and it's just so subtle, you know, and again, on this whole kind of topic of shame and blame, I'm curious, why do women who have the most going for them, talent, beauty, education, seem to struggle the most for acceptance in this world? And I've got beliefs, but I really am curious on yours. I'm going to say just through work that I've done, I have a deep-rooted story of like what's wrong with me. And it's I've had conversations with my parents recently about this, not necessarily like, you know, and not saying like you fucked me up. It's just, it's a story that, you know, and I catch myself saying it now that I'm more aware, but like, you know, I'm sure like my sister or something, I'll be like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? You know, but that little word, that phrase right there, when you're 5 years old and your parent, because you do something that they don't like and they're like, oh my God, what are you doing? What's wrong with you?
that
Yep.
hits, and that subconscious mind is wide open, and it takes that and internalizes it. And it's like,
Bingo.
something's wrong with me. So that's mine. And I think a lot of women, and probably men too, but I think a lot of women have that same thing. So even when we're dating, guys rejecting us, well, it must be because there's something wrong with me,
Yeah.
So that's definitely that's my deep rooted story. And I want to say, I know that consciously, I know where it first started was with when I was in preschool. A girl told me I couldn't play with her and the other girls. And I was like, I was 4. I'm like, what? So I knew that, but even deeper. And I don't know if I would probably never tell my mom this, and I don't know if she'll listen to this, but whatever. But I was not necessarily planned as a baby. I wasn't a planned pregnancy. And with that being said, though, I also made my mother very sick. So I think that probably, and I don't know if y'all believe this, but we still hear things, we still interpret things when we're in the womb, when we're, whatever.
Well, we do, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure she was like, oh my God, I'm dying, or God, someone just kill me because this baby's killing me, kind of thing. I'm sure that there was not all high positive vibrational language coming out of my mom's mouth when she was pregnant with me, and even probably when she found out, she was probably like, oh shit, because they had a 5-month-old at the time. My sister and I were back to back. So, and they were very poor. They were poor. They didn't have a lot of money either. So they're like, what are we going to do? So I feel like that even could have been the first initial rejection in a sense.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And, it's interesting because, everybody wants to be safe and protected, seen, understood, and connected. And we want that most from our biological parents whenever it's possible, because that's just science, chemical reactions, energy. It's all of it. We're a part of an extension of all of their cells in so many pieces. And, it is interesting because listening to you talk, it's so many people who've suffered with shame in some capacity, right? Mm-hmm. Who early as kids either didn't feel that they were seen and understood or connected at the deepest level, right? Learned very early to put their armor up, which then creates further disconnection, right? And what starts to happen through a lot of the narratives, and I see it in you, I know I suffered from this, many people learn to receive love, validation, and connection through performance.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And in so many ways, you even still repeat that pattern and cycle because it's easier to stay busy and do. And you do have a lot you want to accomplish than it is sometimes to be in those moments where it's like, oh, yeah, no, there's still work to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because once you've been digging for a while, it gets tiring.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating. So about a year ago, I was working with a coach and I was having a breakdown. And, I was like, again, ever since Love is Blind came out, I've been very in my head about a lot of things. Again, kind of society telling me who I am or how I'm supposed to show up, or me just, subconsciously scrolling and seeing my castmates or other reality TV people doing things. And I'm like, oh, they're doing that. Maybe I should be doing that too. Things like that. So there was a lot of I knew I was so disconnected from myself. And my coach was like, oh, were you fighting, for the spotlight with your sister growing up? And I was like, no, I wasn't. And she was like, well, but there's something from when your childhood. She was like, were you on the cheerleading team? Were you on and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I was a lead role in a play in middle school. I was a lead role in a play in high school. I was prom queen. I was on the homecoming court. And she was like, you're chasing the spotlight. She's like, and you're you already have a spotlight. You already are a spotlight. We all have our own spotlight. She's like, you are worthy because you were born, not because you were prom queen, not because of this. And I was like, oh my God, and I was just crying even more. I'm like, yeah, but that's it. I think that's it. Because, and I think because I lost a lot of engagement and my metrics weren't, being engaged with as much. I was almost are people forgetting about me? And so I was like, what do I have to do? And again,
your value and worth was tied up in other people's opinions.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. And granted, those were all my own inner dialogue. It wasn't someone else is saying this, of course, but I'm like, okay, that person created that type of reel. Maybe if I do that, then I'll get a bunch of likes again and people will re-engage with my stuff. Like,
that's right.
It's crazy. We're
but literally, like, what's interesting is, again, even what you're describing is just the fight or flight response of reactions that are tied to the emotional triggers because of the trash from your past that hasn't been identified, removed, or transformed.
Totally.
Like, that's just the truth, right? Because in those moments when your engagement is dropping or you get FOMO because one of your showmates is on a different show, right? All that is nothing to do with what's right in front of you and everything to do with how you felt when you were 6 and your dad looked at you a certain way.
Totally.
And I'm using an example. I'm not saying that your dad looked at you, but but it's always connected to that like trigger, right? Like that's what it is. And so that's what's funny is we often are even hiding in our current realities from stuff that affected us 25 years ago.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
What I'm curious about, Kelly, because I feel it and I feel like you're also willing to go there. So I'm going to ask a question. Okay. What are you still protecting?
Oh. I don't know. I'm like, there are things I don't know, because there's a part I literally have on my phone screen, like, you're not going to play small anymore kind of thing. I don't know what I'm protecting. I don't know what that is, because I feel like, I'd have to sit with that. I don't know. I don't know if it's like,
I want you to sit. I want you to sit with that.
Yeah.
I think that will create a lot of freedom in your life in ways that you don't even realize. Yeah. And I think that as it relates to even what we're just talking about right now, even in the moment of trigger, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. Okay. So you know what I mean when I say moment of trigger, right? Yeah. Like somebody leaves a shitty comment and you're on having a weekday and you just feel like trash for a second, right? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. So the trigger moment, when you feel that low frequency negative energy, I want you to pause, take a breath, and ask yourself 2 questions. Okay. Is what I'm reacting to right now due to what's right in front of me or from the trash from my past? Yeah. And then the second question, what am I protecting in this moment? Because the reaction and the trigger is putting armor up that is protection, which is further disconnecting you from what and who you really want, not only for yourself, but external of you. Yeah. And so if you can, one, sit with the concept of what am I still protecting? Because that, I think there's a lot there for you. Yeah. Right. And offline, you and I can have another conversation if you want. But what I'm going to say is, just for now, ask those 2 questions. Yeah. Okay. Well, something just came to me, but yes, I do love it. Beautiful. Let's hear it. If you have it, let's go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And granted, this is probably only a part of it, but, so my sister, I guess she kind of went down the spiritual path 10 years prior to me. Right. So, however, she's ran into a lot of obstacles and challenges, and therefore my parents, there are some times that they're like, I don't believe, or I don't like that they don't agree with the way that we think in certain ways. Right. Okay. So I think that a part of it is I'm protecting myself from, although I do have conversations with them, but maybe I'm a little bit more choosy with my language, whereas my sister just kind of says it like it is, and then it's like blows up a shitstorm. So I feel like that's a part of my protection, is like, I don't want maybe my parents to, like, us to have like a conflict. Like I feel like I can say things that they can help them understand. Like, I can say the exact same thing that my sister says, but I can say it in a way that my parents are like, oh, like they can actually kind of get it, But if I really was having a conversation with someone that already got it, I probably wouldn't be like like beating around a bush in a sense. Do I have permission to reflect something back to you? Yeah. I know we're on recording right now, so I always ask that because I want to make sure you feel good. Cool. Yeah. You're being so open and you're so amazing. I think you just gave yourself a really deep connection to an answer that will give you a lot of clarity. Okay. Because I think there was a lot of chaos that you experienced around you when you were little that caused you to feel like you had to hide and make yourself small so that you could not cause any more ripple effects because of what additional reaction it might do in the environment. Yeah. Right. Simultaneously, the level of disconnection that you felt, right, because you weren't giving the opportunity to be seen and understood and connected at the deepest level, you started to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, and you got the spotlight. And so what's been really interesting is shame impacts you on both sides, because it's not just I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. It's who the fuck do you think you are when you show up and you do something big. Right. And the reality of it is you no longer have to make yourself and your voice small because you are coming into your own. And understand that your boundaries exist purely based on your existence when you're clear on who you are.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have blowups and explosions to speak your truth and own your boundaries.
Right, totally.
But the problem is that we have so many conditioned patterns in our lives. Yours is very clear. That makes us believe that that's not true.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, take that for what it is. I'm really grateful that you went there because I'm telling you for a fact that part of our conversation is going to have massive impact because that resonates with lots of people and lots of women and lots of little girls. And that's the truth because that's often what happens in our world.
Yeah.
And so shifting a little bit here, my friend, I'd love for you to define love for us and what it means to Kelly Chase.
Nowadays, I want to say the biggest thing about love is one, loving yourself, creating a safe space within yourself, because when you create a safe space within yourself, you're able to hold space for and create that emotional safety for your partner or a friend or coworker or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think the safety is a really big word that I've really honed in on lately. And you know, I think that it's because of like the health stuff that I've been going through, but just the coaching and the learning that I've been doing about your nervous system, regulating or keeping your nervous system regulated. I have an issue with my vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve that runs from your gut to your head. And like, it's because there's a stored trauma in my body. Like I know exactly why, when it got screwed up and all that. And it's,
well, your nervous system has been in fight or flight and it's tapping everything else. And the thing is like it stacks because your autonomic nervous system is down here. Then it's like ability to function and then it's cognitive ability. So if the base is broken, you can't function. You get brain fog, you get fatigue, you get, right? And so I deeply identify with this because again, my trauma in my body has taken me a long time to work with. In the last 18 months, I've done a lot of intentional things to reverse the effects on my nervous system and it brought it back into check. Awesome. So we'll talk further about that because I have a few things that I know will help you and took me years to really find, but have had massive effect. I love your answer though for love. And I really, really appreciate the safety element to it. Like more than I can describe.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. You know, I did say a second ago, I think we all want to be safe, protected, seen, understood, and connected, right? But we don't get seen, understood, and connected, and we can't receive love unless we feel safe. Right. Because if we don't feel safe, we inherently protect ourselves.
Totally.
Right. And when that happens, this always connects us. And, you know, I don't know how much you know about my background or past, but it was only a few years ago that I discovered that I had a really, really deep level of anger, like buried so deep it could barely be excavated. And I didn't even know it was
sure I do too.
Right. Yeah. And so I say this because literally 99% of the people in my life, when I actually owned it and said it after the fact, they're like, what? You're angry? But what that meant is that the three people I actually care most about, my wife and my two kids, they got everything.
Yeah.
My big energy, the ability I have to infuse light into people, the ability I have to help people grow. Imagine that flipped on the other side. It's crushing.
Yeah. Oh,
right.
For sure.
And when I started to really unpack that was actually something that our marriage counselor said to me that resonated deeply. I say it now all the time too to other people. In fact, I said it to a guy this morning at breakfast. When there's moments of interaction, particularly for men, I'm going to say this particularly for men because our masculine energy is strong, it's big, it's scary, and unbridled, it can create a lot of damage.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And I'm owning that. I fit that description. I did it. I created damage. I never hit anybody. Right. But I screamed and I had an edge and they knew how I felt, whether I said a word or not.
Yeah.
Right. And so the reality of it is that was the biggest question that my therapist started to ask is, in those moments of conflict, does your wife feel safe?
Right. Probably no.
She didn't. And that was the biggest level that kept us from being disconnected at the depth of our ability to reach each other intimately. And I don't mean that sexually, because there wasn't emotional safety.
Exactly.
I provided for my family financially. I was a physical protector for my family. I was an intellectual and mental leader for my family. And I energetically regulated a whole lot. But if emotional safety doesn't exist, nothing else does.
No, I totally agree.
And so I really wanted to honor you saying that because it's beautiful. And the reality of it is that definition doesn't come from a place that you don't have perspective.
Right.
When did you receive love that you didn't feel safe?
I mean, I am sure. I mean, obviously, when I was growing up, I'm sure my parents said things that, you know, when I was, 5 years old and 10 and whatnot. Yeah, like things happen. I mean, I remember that whole, again, kind of like what's wrong with you, going back to that. There really was a conversation. I had some girlfriends over. I was probably like, maybe like 14 or something, had some girlfriends over, and I don't know if me and the girls did something like in the basement. And I don't know, my dad got real ticked off though. And he was like, what's wrong with you? Like, why would you do that? And it was so embarrassing, like in front of my friends. And I just like, wall up, girls, it's fine. Like, let's just go upstairs, like, so I know that was one thing, of course. But, I mean, later on too, I had a friendship turned situationship in college, and it went south very quickly. So that created a lot of emotional unsafety for me. And it's funny because my mom literally just brought this up the other day, and she was like, you went to one therapy session, and I remember picking you up and you were like, I'm good, and she's like, I mean, I thought you were fine and blah, 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 blah. But maybe, she said something like, and that was that, and I go, like, I know I'm going to have this conversation. We were talking about something else, so I didn't have the opportunity to talk to her about this, but I was like, Mom, I got in the car and said that because the therapist she said something very condescending, or I perceived it in a condescending way or condescending tone. And therefore I was like, no, I'm good. I don't need to go back to her. Right. So the therapist made me feel unsafe. Right. So for that whole scenario, I never did any therapy for that situation from college until 2018. So 15 years later, 10, 15 years later. And then it started like breaking down like all these things as I was working with different like mindset coaches and therapists and whatnot. And I was like, whoa, like the physical, the verbal, the emotional, the sexual trauma from that situation is why that is a part of why I was working unfulfilling jobs, burning myself out, losing myself in men, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Those are reasons why, because I never dealt with it. I was totally just, let me disconnect in every way that I can possible, because I don't want to feel the shame and the guilt and the frustration and the sadness and all the things that. But
ironically, you felt worse every fucking time you did those things that you thought were going to make you feel better.
I'm sure. But I never made that connection until just 5 years ago.
Right. That's the interesting thing. Because consciously,
it was so like deeply, it was very deep, and I'm sure like that's, I mean, granted, like I go through coaching calls and everything. And I even say this to women, people that I coach. I'm like, okay, we're bringing up limiting beliefs. We're bringing up all this stuff. And okay, your mom said this, your dad said this, your school teacher said this. I was like, this is not for you to go back and be like, you fucked me up. Like you did this, you did that.
It's not about shame and blame.
Yeah, no. I'm like, it's not a blame game. It's just recognizing that is not true, and how to discover how to reword that so that we can reprogram and put you on a different path in life. But because you have to, like, after that long-term relationship 10 years ago, again, I was in a really bad spot, and one of my college guy friends, he sent me this thing and it said, hurt people. And it said, hurt people, free people. And I will never forget it. Like I've been for 10 years, that has been a mantra in my head. Granted, the first 4 or 5 years, I didn't really get it, but until I started doing this work though. And then I'm like, okay, so you have to, again, you're not going to go and start pointing fingers at everybody. It's, wow, like they're hurting too. That's why they said these things, right? Or that's why they acted this way. It doesn't mean you got to like go and be around them. You can distance and put up some healthy boundaries though, but
safety and love is needed. It absolutely is. And you have to feel safe in your own skin, and you have to facilitate a safe environment for others to be able to feel that level of connection. I'm curious, you have lots of perspective in the spotlight on a major platform, right? You understand the shame and the blame that can be carried in that and the pressure that provides for you. You also understand like these dynamics about masculinity versus femininity and the different elements of shame that exist in our society for both. So I'm curious, in a second life, are you coming back as a woman or as a man?
Ooh. Are you going to see a woman again? Yeah.
Atta girl.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. As I've seen you move through the world, I've been really happy to see you also open up and really normalize conversations that need to happen in the world. And so I'm really curious in your perspective, why do you believe that female pleasure is so taboo still in this world?
Whew. Yeah. Well, that definitely goes to a lot of the programming that we are societal, religious programming. I say religious with an emphasis because I know that's definitely, something people just feel a lot of guilt and shame around. I mean, not even just self-pleasure, like sex in general, like having sex
tons.
before marriage, you know, it's like, especially with Catholics in particular, you know, it's like they think they're going to hell if they do that before marriage. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just decades and centuries probably of just shame around that. I mean, it's so interesting because like I remember my parents they're great. They're great. My parents sheltered me in certain ways, you know, like even like the, 90210, Melrose Place, like those shows from back in the day, you know, I was probably like 10 or 11 when my parents were watching 90210. And rightfully so. There were conversations and things going on that I didn't need to see at 10 or 11 years old. But granted, you know, when I was older, like I wouldn't say my like high school and early college friends were watching like Sex in the City. And I never like, because I was so sheltered, like I'm like, let's watch Full House still and Saved by the Bell. Like I'm good with those shows still. But it's just so fast.
Family Matters, Step by Step, man, like all those, right?
Those PG shows, right? So, and it's nothing to say. And granted, my parents, yeah, they obviously talked to us and gave us the birds and the bees kind of conversation and whatnot. But I don't know if it was like, I don't know if my mom self-pleasure, like, I don't know. That was never a conversation. It was just,
it was not talked about.
It was never talked about. So then, you know, like, I don't even know if I ever watched a Sex in the City episode, like younger. Obviously friends of mine, you know, would make sexual innuendos and sometimes I would catch on. Sometimes I'm like, I'm so virgin ears. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. But I just actually watched all of Sex in the City as a 37-year-old, like literally like over Christmas, Thanksgiving and everything. And I was like, wow, because the women in the show were our age, were my age. They were 35, around 35, 37. And I'm like, okay, but my friends, when they were 17, 18, 19, 20, were watching a show of women doing these things that are almost 15, 20 years older than them. So I was like, wow, like they were so like, they were opened up to this like sexual world when they were that young, whereas I was not. So they all had vibrators and they were all like, you know, talking about masturbation and sexual things. And I didn't know some of the things they were talking about. You know? I'm like,
I mean, I think you're so right, though. I mean, on so many levels. And, you know, there is so much shame still in this world, particularly for little girls and young women, just in general. And as a father of a daughter, you know, I want my daughter to always feel very comfortable in her body, know her boundaries, know what she's capable of, know how to pleasure and love herself. And right. And though that's not going to be my job to teach her as her father, right, I can make sure that she has a safe environment for it. But like something as simple as, you know, my wife encouraging her to use a mirror to look at herself. Right. Like just knowing her body, understanding what it is, right? Like at a level that, you know, she's 7, but she's curious and she asks questions and like, and there can be so much subtle shame around little kids' bodies and just what the world is. And everything is sexualized these days, as we know. So it's always a matter of like helping normalize for their age group. But I appreciate you having the courage to use the platform that does exist for you because of the choices that you've made to start actually really advocating for the things that you believe in and being a light and really providing elevation and empowerment for many women and young women and girls to be able to better explore their femininity as well as their
Totally.
masculinity and exploring who they are as an individual, because that is so important and so lost in so many parts of our society. And I'm happy that you're finding that, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, I thought I had a mentality that I was broken for a while. So for me to explore myself with toys or whatever and realize that's not the case in that regard, you know, I was like, wow, you know, so, you know, what you were saying earlier about, you know, when your 2 questions, you know, because obviously, I promote the sex toys occasionally on my social media, and I obviously thought those are probably very engaged with posts that I have. But some people, you know, they obviously like will write out, they'll hate, they'll put out their shame, or they'll like, and I share a little bit of my story of like sexual trauma. And I feel like the last time I posted, it was like in February, and someone had a comment like, wow, like you're using your sexual trauma to like promote or to like make money off of like sex toys or whatever. And I was like, wow, who hurt you? Like, first of all, like I'm sharing a story. This is how I cope. You can go cope with however you are. Like this is a part of my healing journey. And you know what? I'm going to be totally transparent here, but I recognized recently, I know this isn't asked for, but I'm going to share it.
Please do.
But I recognized recently I was being intimate with someone, and he was like, what do you like? What do you like? And for a minute, I was like, what you're doing feels good. And that's how I responded. I said, what you're doing feels good. And in my head, I was like, Kelly, you kind of became a little dependent on your vibrator because I couldn't tell him what I liked. I was like, oh,
so
shit.
Thank you for sharing that though, because that's also truth, right? And I'm going to overstep a boundary that I don't typically do, because I talk a lot about my wife and my life, but we don't always get, you know, super detailed in sexual things, just because it's something that we protect and are private about. But I will tell you that like, that is a conversation I know that my wife had with me, and we've talked about that, like earlier in life, especially, like she was conditioned to not actually look for, seek, or get her own pleasure. Right. And how many women who don't seek their own pleasure because they believe their role is just to give it to the man because that's what the world's told them or whatever. But like the reality of it is I feel like every human being needs to have a sexual relationship with themselves, because they need to understand their body first before they can be a part of exploring someone else's, or for them to explore someone else's. And that doesn't mean that I always followed that. That doesn't mean that I was perfect. Fuck no. Like I did a bunch of stupid shit when I was a teenager that was, again, because I was told never to have sex before marriage. And I was like, well, fuck, then I'll do random shit in places that I could get caught, aren't safe, because I was hiding activity that I was looking and seeking for anyway, right? And so I then felt bad about who I was, how I was showing up. The way you speak so confidently and so openly, like I truly believe it. My purpose in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. And you're doing that every single time. And the reality of it is the fact that you're able to now understand, like, wow, like, why are you hurting so bad? And separate that from it has zero to do with you. Yeah. It's beautiful. And the hard part is, you know what? Like, that's also a part of shame. Is saying that your life, your experience, and your credibility that you can actually empower other people on is a place that you shouldn't monetize.
Right.
Guess what? It's what's in your life. You have the ability to talk about it from a place of credibility. It is your truth. It is your reality. And what I hear through you is you're not sacrificing any of you and your standards to promote this product, because it's in deep alignment with what you believe for yourself and what you want possible for all girls and women.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And so for that reason, I just want to reflect that back to you, because I know that for myself, one of my biggest hurdles to receive was that I always had this belief that if I got these things, that it was going to seem as if it was greed or feeding me, or if it was going to benefit me, it wouldn't hurt. But I would ask for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for philanthropy. And I had made a lot of money in a very successful business. So I'm not sitting here being like, oh, but like I couldn't receive because of the shame that I carried around how I was. And I had a mentor of mine hit me between the eyeballs about 2.5 years ago. And he said, Brian, he said, your greatest failure is your ability to ask for help and receive. And I said, whoa. I said, what do you mean? Tell me more. And he said, you will ask for anything for anyone as long as you don't have a perceived benefit for self.
Wow.
But he said, here's what I know about you, Brian. He said, I know that anything that flows through you is going to flow into everyone in your world because that's just how you operate. He goes, anything that elevates you, you're going to use to elevate other people. Any financial resources, leverage, anything. I know without a shadow of a doubt that it's going to have a massive impact, but you're actually doing them a disservice if you don't allow yourself to receive at that level because of those reasons. And so I'm not saying that you have a problem with receiving by any means. I'm trying to relate this to say, look, this happens all the time. And people who end up building any kind of platform can be looked at as like, oh, they're just manipulating the system. You know what? There's a lot of fucking people that do. There's a lot of people that do. And that's sad. But it's also sad that that becomes the first assumption. I know. And so I just want to really support you and encourage you because you are a voice for people like my daughter who's 7, who's not ready to be exploring her body in all those adult ways yet. She will be protected and safe, but as soon as she's ready, old enough and mature enough to process it, my wife's going to be having intentional discussions with her so that she can stand in her power and potential as a woman. And that's also what leads to the deepest level of connection and intimacy with the partner. Absolutely.
It really does. It really does. And what you said earlier about like just being intimate with yourself, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's just, you have to like, it's about you first. Everything. Like one of my mentors, whenever she was like, you go first. That was kind of like her little tagline, you go first. So you want to have a better relationship? Well, you got to have a better relationship with yourself. You want to have a better business? You got to like cultivate this like safety within yourself so that you can have a better business and health and all this stuff. Like you want to be able to communicate better with people, you got to learn how to communicate yourself. You want to be intimate better with other people, you got to be more intimate with yourself and know your body. So it's important.
I always say investing in you is the least selfish thing you can do, and it'll pay the greatest dividends over time because it impacts every single thing in your life. And so, my friend, I just love how you show up, how you are actually impacting in the world. I've got 2 other questions, but I know we're really tight on time. So do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I know that we get interrupted, and I really wanted to make sure that we can ask these questions. What's the Kelly Chase legacy going to be?
Whoa, goodness. I want to say, I want to leave a legacy for people to step into who they are and create a life that they crave. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I'll keep it short.
It's beautiful. And I know that you've got this amazing podcast called Chase Life with Kelly. Talk to us a little bit about that and any ways that they can engage with you, because I want my entire audience to know who you are, be able to access the things that you sell from personal experience and credibility and that you provide in the world to help elevate other people.
I love that. Thank you. So Chase Life with Kelly, it has evolved a little bit here and there over the years, but the foundation behind every guest that I have on the show, as well as me just doing solo episodes, it's sharing your story. Storytelling is going to allow you to feel, or let the listeners feel less alone. It's it's part of healing. But really having the guests share their self-love journey, share how them tuning into certain self-care or self-healing modalities has really influenced and changed their entire life. I know that I hone in on relationships a lot because I think relationships is huge. And again, it stems back to yourself. You have to have the relationship with yourself. So if I'm asking questions about relationships or dating or sex or whatever, it's for the mere fact of, okay, well, how are you navigating that? What tools can you offer my audience so that they can go back and do this information? I have mental health experts on my podcast too. I have a variety of people, but the stemming foundation is that self-love and that self-empowerment. Yeah.
I love it, my friend. Thank you for how you show up in the world and for all you do and for being so open and vulnerable and real with us today.
You're so welcome. Thanks. And you guys can follow me. Instagram, it's Chase Life with Kelly as well. And I have all in my link tree is ways that you can work with me, from digital courses to
beautiful
one-on-one coaching.
And we'll make sure that those are in the show notes as well so that everybody can find you. I want to make sure that they know who you are. And for everyone who just watched, Kelly jumped in, man. She told us some real truths about her life. She unpacked the areas that she felt the need to protect and admitted that she's still exploring where she's protecting. But at the same time, it's about stepping into her own truth, understanding the power of her own voice, and realizing that if she invests in who she is and allows herself to explore connection, pleasure, love in ways that her prior definitions didn't fit, she's now finding a new freedom that's also elevating and empowering so many others. Each and every one of you has that opportunity. But as you know, it requires you to flip open your lid and scan your can.